We begin now at the top of Daf Kuf Beis Amud Aleph Meseches Shabbos. This is Shabbos Daf 102a. The Mishnah here says as follows: Hazorek v'nizkar me'achar sheyotzta miyado. Let's say a person throws an item on Shabbos and he remembers that it's Shabbos after the item leaves his hand. Kolta acher, kolta kelev. If another person catches the item, or a dog catches the item, oshen isrfo, or it's burned instead of landing, it lands in a fire. Potter. In those cases, he is potter. Glazos chabura. Let's say a person throws something in order to make a wound. Bein ba'adam uvein b'vehema, whether it's by a man or whether it's by an animal. V'nizkar ad shelo nases chabura, and he remembers before the chabura is made that it's Shabbos. Again, he's potter in this case as well, and the Mishnah explains, Zeh haklal, this is the rule, kol chay v'chatos, anytime a person is chay v'chatos, einon chayavin ad shetehei tchilason v'sofan shkoga. They're only chayav if the beginning of the action and the end of the action was b'shogeg, was by mistake. Tchilason shkoga v'sofan zadon, if the beginning was a mistake and the end was on purpose. Tchilason zadon v'sofan shkoga, if in the beginning they did it on purpose and in the end it was a mistake, they forgot that it's Shabbos. Peturin, in those cases, they're potter. Ad shetehei tchilason v'sofan shkoga, the beginning and the end need to be b'shogeg, and that's why in this case, in the first case of the Mishnah, when the person threw the item and he remembered that it was Shabbos, he's going to be potter in that case. Rashi here says, Hazorek b'shogeg, somebody throws b'shogeg, v'nizkar shu Shabbos, he remembers it's Shabbos, me'achar sheyotzto evan miyado v'kodem shetanuach, after the stone leaves his hand before it lands, and then it said, kol ta'achar, if someone else catches it. Kosal kadaitach, right now we think, la'achar shenizkar zeh, after this guy remembered that it was Shabbos, kol ta'achar, then another person caught the item, havelu shnayim shasua, so the reason why you're potter is because it's two people doing the malacha. Ukagon shenekar mimakomo, for how is it two people doing the malacha? Because the guy catching it had to uproot himself from his position, so he was helping, he was assisting in the landing of the item, v'kibel, and he caught the item. Osha kol ta'kelev b'fiv, or another case could be where the dog caught it in his mouth, de lo have hanacha, that's not called a hanacha, de va'inan makam dalid potter, because you need a makam dalid, so in these cases you're potter. Now the obvious problem is, if the reason you're potter is because you remembered in the middle of the malacha that it's Shabbos, and it doesn't follow the end of the rule in the Mishnah that it needs to be the beginning b'shogeg and the end b'shogeg, so what do we need all this business about somebody catching it, or a dog catching it, or it gets burned? That seems to be irrelevant. You should be potter anyway. That's what the Gemara is going to ask right now. So the Gemara says, Hanacha chayiv, but if it would land properly, the implication is that you'd be chayiv. V'halon nizkar, but didn't he remember in the middle of doing the malacha that it was Shabbos? Utananim, we learned in this very same Mishnah, kol chay v'chatos einan chayavin, ad shetei tchilason v'sofan shkaga. The rule is that when it comes to chay v'chatos, you're only chayiv if the beginning and the end is b'shogeg, and here he remembered. So the remembering alone should be the reason why you should be potter. You shouldn't need this extra step that it's called to acher, called to kelev, oshen isrfa. What do we need that for? So Amar Rav Kahana answers, Seifa asan lichta umisna. The case of the Seifa is talking about where the item you're throwing is attached to a rope. It's a clasp that's attached to a rope. And so the Gemara says, 1 second, if that's the case, lechta umisna ogdo biyadohu. If we're talking about a rope that's, you're throwing something that's attached to a rope, so the eged, it's connected to you the whole time, that's not even called zrika, you should never be chayiv in such a case. Let's see Rashi over here. Rashi explains, first of all, Rashi says, the implication is that if it landed after Daled Amos and Rosh Hashanah, you'd be chayiv. Even though the person remembered it was Shabbos between uprooting the item and placing the item down. But Katani Seifa Za'aklav v'chulu, doesn't it say in the end of the Mishnah, Seifa de Katani Achatei Tchilason v'sofan shkaga, the beginning and the end need to be v'shogeg. So the Gemara answers that we're talking about lichta umisna. Skipping down here in Rashi explains the logic. Kilomar lo mesukma seifa ela bezorek lichta hakosher bechevel katan kedarko va'oches hachevel biyado. The case of the end of the Mishnah where it says you have to have the beginning and the end b'shogeg is only talking about where you have the rope is still in your hand and the clasp is attached to the end of it. Ucheshenizkar hoya biyado lechos hachevel ula'akev zrikas hilchasa shelo tanuach. At the time that you remembered, it was theoretically possible to stop the malacha from happening. You could have pulled the item back and it would not have come to rest. Hilkach tchilaso shogeg v'sofo mezid u'pater. That is called tchilaso b'shogeg and sofo b'mezid in your pater. Aval zorak tzror v'chefetz. But if a person throws a rock or some item shekeshenizkar ein biyado la'akvo, that at the time that you remember that it's Shabbos, it's no longer possible to stop the item from landing, kule shogegu, that's called entirely shogeg. V'nizkar de katani bereisha ashminan ribusa. And so the beginning of the Mishnah is talking about throwing, and the real reason you're potter is because it was caught either by another person or by kelev or landed in a fire. So why does it say anything about remembering in the reisha? That's to teach us this chiddush. The afal gav the nizkar, that even though he remembered lo mifter mechatas ela imkain called the achar okelev. The only reason you're pater, the remembering doesn't make you pater in such a case alone because you've already thrown it. It's too late. But the only reason you're pater is because it was caught by somebody or caught by a dog or it landed in a fire. That's essentially what the Gemara is answering. But then the Gemara says this is not a good answer. If you throw something attached to a rope, even if you're shogeg the entire time, you're actually not chayiv. The ein kan zrika. That's not called zrika at all. So the Gemara does not like this particular answer. So the Gemara answers, Kagon sheniskavein lasos chabura. You're going to have to say that in the first case of the Mishnah, where you're throwing the item, and it's attached to a rope, you're not chayiv for throwing the item dalet amos because it's attached to a rope. It's ogdo biyado. The real issue was you were trying to wound either a person or an animal, and the real issue was lasos chabura. And Rashi here explains, Kagon sheniskavein lasos chabura betchilaso b'shigagas Shabbos. Originally, when you didn't realize it was Shabbos, you're trying to make a wound. And you remember before the wound happens, we are talking about with a clasp attached to a rope. You're making a chabura. In such a case, you're chai because you remember it was Shabbos. Because you're able to, this will be talking about in the end of the Mishnah, because you're able to stop the item from hitting the person. Nimtza sofo zadon, so at the end of the malacha is on purpose. Halon is karchayv, and if he wouldn't remember, he would be chayv. Even though he has the egg in his hand, even though the rope's in his hand, because we're not even talking about zrika elamisham chabura, we're talking about making a wound. So the Gemara here is saying that at the end of the Mishnah, when it's talking about throwing an item, it's not talking about a malacha of throwing dalet amos on Shabbos, it's talking about a malacha of making a wound. So the Gemara says that doesn't make sense either. Hanami Tanina, that's in the same Mishnah as well, because it says in this very same Mishnah, Hazorek lasos chabura bein ba'adam bein ba'behem, if a person's throwing an item to make a wound, whether he's wounding an animal, v'nizkar achalo nasas chabur, he remembers before the wound is made, pater, he's pater. So that case is already in the Mishnah. So now you're going to say that's the end of the Mishnah. So the Gemara now gives an alternative answer. Elo ma Rava, rather Rava says, b'maver, the seif of the Mishnah where it talks about a rule of tchilaso b'shogeg and sofa b'shogeg is talking about carrying an item, dalet amos in Rosh Hashanah. And that there, if you remember in the middle of the malacha, you actually be pater because you could have stopped in the middle. But in the Reish of the Mishnah, we're talking about throwing an item. It's not attached to a rope or anything like that. And that's why in such a situation, the only reason you're pater is because it's caught by another person or by a kelev, etc. So the Gemara says, V'hazah klal de katani azrika katani. That doesn't make sense because the rule, zeh klal, the end of the Mishnah, isn't it following up on all the cases of throwing items in the beginning of the Mishnah? Elo ma Rava, rather Rava says, Tarti katani, you have to read the Mishnah like two separate statements. Hazoreg v'nizkar me'achar sheyatzta miyado inami lo nizkar. The call to achar or call to kelev. You read it as two separate things. You throw an item and you remember, or you don't remember and then somebody else catches it or a dog catches it, ocean isfer, it gets burned. Pater, you're going to be pater in that case. Rashi here explains, Alama Rava Reisha Mili Mili Katani Lo. You have to learn the Reisha as two separate statements. Vetarti Katani Hazorek V'nizkar. If a person throws an item and he remembers, Inami Lo Nizkar. If he doesn't remember, V'kal Ta'achar V'chulu, and someone else catches it, V'hadar Tani Klala Le'suye Maver. And then the reason why we have Zaklal is to include a case of Maver. A person is carrying it and he remembers in the middle, he's also going to be pater. Now, according to this answer, if a person throws an item and remembers in the middle, he actually will be pater. We don't say that that's considered entirely shogig. That's according to this answer of Rava. Ravashi says, Chisure mechzer v'hachi katani. There are words reading in the Mishnah, you have to read it like this. Hazorek v'nizkar me'achar sheyatzta miyad. If a person throws an item and remembers after it leaves his hand, kol ta'achar or kol ta'kelev o shenisraf pater. If it gets caught by a person or by a kelev or it gets burned, he's pater. Hanacha chayiv. But if it comes to rest, he actually would be chayiv. B'med devarim amurim. And when is he chayiv? Shechazer v'shachach. If he again forgot, in other words, he threw it, and in the middle he remembers the Shabbos, and he again forgets before it lands. But he doesn't. If he doesn't again forget before it lands, pater, he would be pater. Shekal chayve chatos, because when it comes to chiyuv chatos, einon chayav and achet tehei tchilason v'sofan shkag, he's only going to be chayiv when the beginning and the end are b'shogeg. Rashi here explains chisure mechzer olom chada katani. According to Rav Ashi's reading of the Mishnah, can all be one statement. Shechazar v'shachach kodem shetanuach. The way Rav Ashi understands is he forgot before it came to rest. The havalei tchilaso v'sofo shkaga, the beginning and the end are b'shogeg. V'ashmina nizkar detano ba l'rebusa. And the reason why we have a case of remembering in the middle is a chiddush. The afagav dehavo yediyah bein tayim. Even though there was a yediyah in the middle, mechayev, he's still chayev de'ein yediyah l'chatzi shir, dehainu ke'ein biyado l'hachzir. The way that Rashi understands the Chiddush over here is that there's no Yediyah for a Chatzi Shir, and in this particular case, he couldn't return it. The implication at the end of Rashi is that in a case where you're walking and in the middle, you remember, we'll discuss this in the next sugya, but the implication here from Rashi is that in a case where, let's say, you're carrying the item and you remember in the middle and then you forget, then maybe in such a case, you would actually not be chayiv, because since at the time that you remembered you could have stopped, so therefore that's considered a remembering that interrupts in the shogeg. But in a case where you threw the item and you remember in the middle but you forget before it comes to a landing, since you couldn't do anything with that remembering, that's considered a beginning and ending b'shogeg. And the Gemara here continues at the two dots. Klal, here's the rule, kol chave chatos. Gemara says, itmar. Shtei amos b'shogeg. Let's say a person goes 2 amos b'shogeg. Shtei amos b'mezid, and a person goes 2 amos b'mezid. Shtei amos b'shogeg, and then 2 amos b'shogeg. Again, very similar to the case that Rav Ashi just detailed. According to Rav Ashi, in such a case, Rav Ashi sounded like he was saying the entire chiddush of our Mishnah is that you're chayiv in such a case. And here the Gemara wants to discuss this more in depth. What is the halacha in such a case? Rabba Amar Potter, Rava Amar Chayiv. Rabba says in such a case you're Potter, Rava says Chayiv. Now Rabba Amar Potter, the reason why Rabba says Potter, Afilu l'Rebbe Gamliel, even according to Rebbe Gamliel, do Amar ein yediyah l'chatzi shir, who says there is no yediyah by a chatzi shir. A classic case would be, let's say a person writes 1 letter. On Shabbos, you need to write 2 letters to be chayiv. So a person writes 1 letter, then remembers in the middle, and then he forgets again and writes a second letter. Ein yediyah l'chatzi shir means you're going to be chayiv in such a case. So even according to Rebbe Gamliel, who says that hasam hu dechi kagamar shiura b'shogeg kagamar, there you're finishing the shir b'shogeg. Aval hacha devimezid lo, but here, where it's where in the middle of the situation, or not in the middle, you're finishing it b'mezid, then actually, or you could theoretically finish it b'mezid, we should say, then you're going to be pater. So the Gemara explains, uvamai, what's the case? Ibezoreg shogegu, if he threw the item and he remembers in the middle, then forgets, he's finishing b'shogeg. Elo b'mavi, rather what we're talking about is carrying. The idea is, since at the moment that you carried it, the second set of 2 amos, that was the end, you could have stopped right there and been chayiv, or you could have stopped right there b'mezid and you would have been pater. That's why in this case you're going to be. That's why in this case you're going to actually be pater, according to Rabba. Rashi here explains. Hasam dechi gamar shiura b'shogeg gamar hakose beis osios bebeis halama. So if somebody writes 2 letters and 2 separate forgettings, the mechayev Rebbe Gamliel ba'os hashniya, where Rebbe Gamliel says you're chayiv in the second letter, nigamar hashir v'yafu b'shogeg. With that second letter, which is the shir to be chayiv, you're doing that b'shogeg. Aval hacha b'shtei amtzayos shehein b'mezid nigmar hashir. Here it's in the middle 2. The middle 2 amos, you did 2 amos b'shogeg and then 2 amos b'mezid. That's where the shir ends. Because we're talking about where you're carrying ushtei amtzayos mezid. But if you would be throwing it, shogeg usharein biyadu lakva, like Rashi said before, if you throw an item, you can't stop it in the middle. So therefore, it really finishes b'shogeg. V'kevan shechazer v'shachach, since this guy forgot again, chayiv delo nigmar malacha shas hanacha she sof uv'shogeg. So what the Gemara really is saying is that Rabba, it has to be talking about when you're carrying the item, and it's specifically for that reason that you're pater. And Rabba would say, according to Rebbe Gamliel, certainly if you threw the item, in such a case, you actually, according to Rebbe Gamliel, you would be chayiv in such a situation. So the Gemara says, Rava Amar Chayiv, that should be Rava. Rava says Chayiv, Afilu Rabbanan da'amri yesh yediyah l'chatzi shir. Even according to the Rabbanan who hold there is yediyah l'chatzi shir, if there was a yediyah after you write the first letter, that would break up the entire thing and you wouldn't be chayiv. Hasam hu deviyado, there it's in your control to stop the issue from continuing. Aval hacha de'ein biyado, but here where it's impossible for this thing not to land, lo, in this case, Rabba would say you're chayiv even according to the Rabbanan. The fact that you remember it in the middle is irrelevant because you couldn't stop it anyway. And the Gemara explains, what's Rava's situation? Ibam avir, if we're talking about when you're carrying the item, hare biyado, certainly you could stop in the middle. Ve'ela bezorek, so obviously you're talking about throwing it. And in Rava's opinion, if you throw the item, remembering in the middle doesn't do anything for you, it's irrelevant because at that point, you couldn't stop the conclusion in any case. Gemara now continues, Amar Rabba says, Zarek v'nacha b'fi hakelev or b'fi hakivshan chayiv. If a person throws an item and it lands in the mouth of a dog or in the furnace, you're chayiv. So the Gemara asks from our Mishnah, V'anan Tanan, didn't we learn in our Mishnah? Kal ta'achar or kal ta'akelev or shenisruf a potter. It says in these cases, you're potter. So the Gemara says, Hasam delo mechavein hacha deka mechavein. It depends if you intended it to land in this area. If you intended it to land in the mouth of a dog or in a fire, then your kavana makes that a chosh of makom, and that's considered a good landing in order to make you chayiv on Shabbos. Amar Veve Barabai said, Afanon nami tanina, we have the same chiddush in a Mishnah. Yesh ochel achila achas v'chayiv aleh dalad chatos. The Mishnah says a person can eat one eating in one sitting, and he's going to be chayiv 4 carbon chatoses, v'asham echad, and 1 carbon asham. What's the case? Hatame she'achal chaylev v'hu noser min hamukdashin. The case is the person is tamei and he eats chaylev, so it's asur to eat chaylev. He eats, the item is noser, it's asur to eat noser, and it's also hektish, and a tamei person cannot eat hektish. And b'yom HaKippurim, he does this on Yom Kippur, which is of course also asur to eat on Yom Kippur. That's how you can come up with all of these different isurim. Rashi explains achila achas zayis echad, you're eating one kezayis. Dalet chatos, what are the 4 carbon chatos? It's mishum chayla, mishum noser, mishum achilas yom HaKippur, mishum tumas haguf, v'yachal kodesh. That's all those things. Because of the tumah of eating hektish, that's the 4th chatos. V'yasham meilos da'afilahu kohen gabe emurim zaru. Even if he's a kohen, but if he's eating the emurim, which you're not allowed to eat the emurim of the carbon, he's considered a zar. No one's allowed to eat the emurim. They're supposed to go on the mizbeach. So that is going to be me'ilah, and that's going to be the carbon. That's going to be the carbon asham. So that's what the Mishnah says. And Rabbi Meir adds, af im hoisa Shabbos v'otziu b'fiv chayiv. Even if let's say it's Shabbos and he's carrying the stuff in his mouth, so that's going to be an additional chiyuv of carrying on Shabbos. So Amrulo, they say back to him, eino min Hashem. That's not min Hashem, meaning that chatas is not because of achila, that chatas is because of carrying, so we were not counting that. So the point of the Gemara is, why should you be chayiv for carrying in your mouth? That's not the normal way to carry. Since he's having kavana to carry that way, his machshava makes it a chosh of a makom. Hachanami here also, kevan to come mechavin, since he's having kavana, machshavto meshavi le makom. His machshava is making it a makom. Hadron Allah Chazorek will return to Parak Hazorek. If you are a regular follower of this channel, please see the description box below. You can see many ways to support this channel, and we'll continue with the next video on Daf Kuf Beis Amud Beis in the next parak of Meseches Shabbos.